we're all really good at slamming doors. We're all really good at saying, but I mean, I think being accountable to yourself, first and foremost, being accountable to yourself, it's a hard thing to do, but when you can get to that point, it just changes everything.
Self-leadership can be lonely. It's hard to do the thing no one else wants to do, that no one else is willing to do. But you are not alone. There are others dancing through the fight and laughing as they lead. Let's find them, swap stories, and live through this together. Welcome to How I Live Through This. I'm your host, Anne Roche, and I'm really glad you're here. Today, I'm delighted to be talking with Sean Murphy. Sean was a police dispatcher with the Boston Police Department for almost 17 years. He's a founding member and peer supporter of the Metro Boston 911 peer support team. Recently, Sean's undergone a career change. Wanting to advocate for workers' rights, he's now a field representative and organizer for Service Employees International Union, Local 888. On a personal level, he's recently embarked on a 2-year weight loss journey and lost 271 pounds. He's become an avid hiker now and is in the maintenance phase of his health journey. Welcome, Sean. I'm really glad you're here.
Thanks, Sam, for having me. This is great. I'm happy to be here.
You're the best. Thank you. I asked you on because of our previous conversations around changing the culture of law enforcement and your role in bringing peer support into the BPD. And I know that you're outside of that now, although still actively involved in the peer support. Can you tell me a little bit more about what peer support means and what led you to focus on that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of, I guess I'll start with the second part of the question first. What kind of led me into it is just realizing there was such a need for it. In general, I think that mental health. We were just talking before you hit the record button, and I think mental health is just. There's such a stigma, especially in the law enforcement community, about mental health. I think in general, in our society, there's a huge stigma. I think it's and the biggest and best way to combat that is to just continually fight the stigma, to be able to speak out about it, to be able to express yourself, to be able to know that it's all right for you not to feel okay. In fact, that's kind of normal. And once you realize that, it there's so much you can learn through peer support that better equips you with day to day. Just in general, I don't feel like going through the process of learning about peer support and taking the classes and taking the courses, I came away from it realizing that I don't think there's a person walking on this planet right now that couldn't benefit from some level of peer support or, from mental health services. And for us, peer support was the ideal vessel, I guess, for that, because a former coworker and friend, roommate, everything, Anthony Landry, he's the coordinator of the unit. And for us, we felt the need that it had to be purely peer driven, because trust and trying to maintain confidentiality, they're key components when you're, in the stage of it where you're, learning about it or trying to essentially decide if you want to utilize it. And basically, what we do is facilitate help for, our, coworkers, our, comrades in arms, and it's just, I felt that, personally speaking, one of the most effective methods is, it's same with training, same with learning how to do your job, was experiencing it from the eyes and ears and voices of those who have maybe come before you, those that you sit with, those that experience the same things. Things just ring true, when you're hearing it from somebody that you've sat next to and seen go through, the things that you've gone through and can relate to, what you're talking about. Dispatching is sort of we're sort of in a weird spot because we're kind of like that cross between, we're civilians, most of the industry at this point is civilian, but we see
Wait, I'm sorry. Time out. What does that mean? Most of the industry at this point is civilian. What does civilian mean in terms of, can you just explain what that is?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, traditionally with dispatching, a lot of, back, I don't know how far going back. I think 911 started in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. Initially, a lot of dispatching would be done by sworn police officers. As the industry sort of evolved, civilians started having more of a bigger roles, and now to the point where a lot of there's a lot of consolidation that is going on in the industry now, where things would be run by individual police departments on a local level. So it would be up to them to figure out how they were going to proceed with whether it was going to be police, whether it was going to be civilian, making up the rules, all that stuff. So everything was different no matter where you went. There's a push now federally, nationwide, to sort of standardize things. I think 9/11 opened up a lot of eyes in law enforcement to the fact that they need a lot more interoperability.
Yeah.
So there's a push. So as a result, I think of that push, what we've seen is that call centers have consolidated. They've become civilian run. Also, essentially, the idea behind that is by peers. So you would create a career ladder for your civilian workforce where they could, promote up into roles of management and actually run units. Not to get off on a sidetrack, but one of the biggest issues that I faced in my particular department was a lack of management that was trained specifically in what we do or has done it. So, it creates a lot of communication issues on the management level. But you're seeing a shift. We're seeing this shift of, now there's a lot of directors of 911 call centers that are, coming from the ranks. There's a couple of groups, APCO being one, and I don't know what the letters stand for, and then NINA. They're two of the major sort of nationwide governing organizations, and they come up with a lot of the standardization and the testing and stuff like that. And they've brought about programs for civilians to, get certificates and get certifications and have more of a standardized sort of managerial system.
For dispatching in particular. Yeah.
Right. Dispatching and call taking too. And
yeah.
so a lot of the smaller places, when you say dispatcher, it's a catch-all. You do everything. You take the call, you dispatch to fire, you dispatch to medical. In my situation and in a lot of like major urban environments, it tends to be they'll be separate. So you'll have like a 911 call taker that their job is to take the call. And a lot of it is just based on, call volume and the size of the department. Like in Boston, for instance, it's essentially like divvied up by district. So you'll have a lot of, it's essentially like, 7 or 8 different police areas, and they're all under one umbrella. So, you have a system where it's just a bunch of dispatchers that do the dispatching, call takers that do the call taking.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's different in different places, and it's still not, there's been a push to standardize, but we're still not there yet. I mean, it's still a work in progress, I guess. I kind of lost where we were.
I'm there. So sorry. I was, I'm so sorry that I interrupted you, but
No.
So it's so fascinating from somebody who's not in law enforcement. It's what I'm discovering is it's not only such a behemoth. I mean, it's so big and so different in different states and different districts and but also it's a business. It's such a business. And so I appreciate you breaking it down. It's, as someone who's not in law enforcement, it's odd to hear the word civilian because that's such a military phrase.
Yeah.
And so I chafe against that a little bit, but I'm just so curious. It is clear that from what you're saying, that there is a distinction made between dispatch and call centers and the the law enforcement or the departments themselves?
It you use the word it chafes. It chafes us too, to be quite honest. So, I mean, I know I mentioned in some previous conversations we had, there's just a lot of misunderstanding, I think, because, while we don't know specifically the job of a police officer, we're very in tune with what they do.
Sure.
We have to be. I mean, it's intrinsic with our job in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of kind of old school mentality that applies, and this relates directly to peer support, where the common refrain we used to hear and we still hear is, oh, if there's a critical incident or if something takes place, and this was a lot of the reasons why Tony and myself and other dispatchers and call takers decided to step up and make this a reality. Was whenever something happened, I mean, I've heard it said on the floor after critical incidents, if one supervisor asks another, did anyone check in on the dispatcher? And literally heard the reply be, oh, they're just the dispatcher. They're fine. They weren't there, but now studies have come out. We're realizing that not only are we affected by what happens, we're affected. Vicarious trauma is a real thing. A lot of what they say about how these critical incidents affect officers in the field, you'll have an officer that may go out and have one or two intense calls or more. I mean, there are days that they're going from intense call to intense call,
Right.
but generally speaking, one a shift, two a shift maybe in a busy urban environment on a weekend in the summer. Well, you could be on dispatch in a regular 8-hour shift, or if you're mandated to a 16-hour shift and you're going through 10, 15, 20 intense calls. We have foot chases, gun calls, I mean, anything. And every time you have one of those calls, whether you're in the middle of it in the street or whether you're experiencing it through, the ears of a dispatcher and listening to the voices on the other end, you get that fight or flight syndrome, and your body is reacting to that. It's pumping adrenaline into you. It's pumping cortisol into you. And I mean, the studies are coming out now that, if you don't treat that effectively with some sort of mental health routine or, some sort of routine to fix that, those cortisol levels just continue to build. And over time, they cause adverse, that's why you see all these, there's a lot of data that's starting to come out about physical health of dispatchers and how it's, over time, because you're not treating those things properly, because you're just consistently dealing with them and it's over and over again, repetitive. If you don't take a beat to, work on that in whatever manner, it builds up.
Yeah.
It causes problems down the road. It's the same with officers, which is, there's, the suicide rate among law enforcement officers is like through the roof.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with those mental health issues just not being treated.
Right.
And if we simply made that, I don't want to say mandatory, but if we made it the norm, I guess would be the best way to put it, these things could be easily avoided. But a lot of times we realize it when it's too late. So that was a lot of the push for us. We saw the need, mainly because I think we saw it in each other's eyes, faces. We were all having problems. I mean, I realized that I was not dealing with things effectively. I was on a bad track with a lot of things in my life, not taking care of things, because you tend to just, I'm going to date myself, and I'm going to put myself out there with my music choice, but there's a song by a hair metal band called Skid Row, and
Sure.
It's 18 in Life, and there's a line in it where he says, I kept my motor running, but I never kept it clean.
Yeah.
And I always think about that because I went through that for about a solid 10 years of my career. And where I was burnt out, I was not paying attention to the warning signs. In fact, I was neglecting them. I was using bad habits to cope.
Right.
because I didn't know what to do. And going through the peer support process on my own, realizing that I needed to, and then, you know, saying, okay, you know what? It's time for me to put my money where my mouth is. And, if I'm going to start preaching this message to people, I need to not only understand what I'm, trying to sell, but I need to, I'm recognizing now that I need to get this help. And I learned so much about just, the way a lot of it has to do with education. And, through the programs that we went through, we learned a lot about why you think the way you do, why your mind works the way it does. And then you start to realize, oh, I'm not, crazy, or I don't have some issue that everyone else doesn't deal with. This is how our brains work. And that to me was an epiphany. And it seems like kind of common sense in a way, but when your blinders are on and you're in the middle of, we say it all the time, we talk about being in the trench, and you just get these blinders and you can only see one way and straightforward, and you're not thinking about, taking care of those things,
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a lot, but
Well, and you're in an organization, in a business, in a industry that doesn't lead with what's the right doesn't I'm struggling to find the word.
doesn't lead, I guess, would be kind of so when it comes to that, it just doesn't put the priority on mental health.
Right.
I have this story. I may have mentioned it to you before, but this was what really opened my eyes. I was taking some of these classes, and when I was, getting my certifications to be part of the peer support team, and we had a class that was it was more geared towards sworn law enforcement officers, and we were in a classroom full of sergeants, chiefs, patrolmen from all over the state of Massachusetts. And this one officer, he got up and he spoke very eloquently about his dealing with issues. And later on during the day, I got angry. I was angry because we were talking about these issues, and I'm still angry about it, because I hold, there's a part of me that holds a lot of these people in positions of power in contempt for them not caring. And when something I think should be inherently cared for and it's not, it's overlooked. And so I made the point out loud that, our bosses, our chiefs, our, commissioners, our, deputies, our superintendents, they should be putting more of a focus on the mental health issues. And the same person that just had an hour ago got up, given this impassioned talk about his struggles and his survival, made a point in the class that, well, that's not their responsibility. It's up to the individual. And I stopped for a second, and I'm like, no, that's where you're wrong, And I just said, how much money do they spend? This person was they like to use the term operator. He was a SWAT person. He was like highly trained, hostage negotiations, all these tactical employments, and, was decorated at all intents and purposes, was from what I heard, was, a top cop. And I just said, how much money did they put into all that for you personally? Because you're an asset to the community, and it's important for you to be highly trained and highly skilled at the jobs that you're doing, because they're such critical importance. They're such highly needed, skilled positions. Don't you think that they should put as much effort and expenditure into making sure that everything is good going on up in your head, and to me, it just seems so, it was like, it's like in your face. How do you not understand that that should be as important or more important? That keeps you in the game. But that was after I'd already kind of gone through some of it
Yeah.
myself and realized, oh, I mean, I can actually do a few small things and make them a part of my daily system, and I can stay sharp and stay on top of this and realize that it's okay to not feel good all the time and acknowledge it and work it out, instead of, going to a bad habit or a bad system that's not going to support that. So to me, it's just, and that was just indicative of it. And this is a person who had gone through, all these things and seen their benefit. And to me, I'm like, how can you not understand this? So I don't know.
It's talking the talk, but not walking the walk. And I can understand why. I mean, I think it's, and I'm not the person to speak to this, but from what I'm hearing, this is a big ship to turn around. I mean, it's so ingrained. It's been such a part of the culture of law enforcement for so long, that kind of hardened warrior stance and externally, and that what you get on the outside is what must be on the inside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a hard place that we're in, because we see, we have the distinct sight of seeing things from from the eyes of those that are actually going into these calls.
Yeah.
And this is a this is a very hot button issue on all sides of the argument too, about, like a lot of talk about when they talk about the defund the police movement and all
Yeah.
those things, and should we be sending officers into all these things? I mean, not to get off on it, but you brought it up. So I mean, I guess my take is that I I often look at, and this to me is overall not as much maybe a law enforcement culture issue as a societal issue, because I think us
Good
as
point.
society definitely have put the law enforcement community in a position where they're essentially societal ales, trash men. So they have to respond to whatever we deem as a society we're not going to issue.
Yeah.
We're not going to deal with. So it's like, it's become a situation where they've been forced into a lot of calls that they necessarily shouldn't have to be going to.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes back to, this is where I talk about it being so cyclical to me. And I end up getting in these spins where I'm like, this is about mental health. All of these issues are about mental health. A lot of it, I do go back to our healthcare industry, and not to, this isn't a dig at those that are providing care, but this is a dig at like how our insurance and how our system is run. That's why mental health isn't a priority, and these things go untreated in the general public, and then other problems occur as a result, and then law enforcement gets involved, and then it becomes a law enforcement issue, and then you have people that are in and out of the court system, which is not functioning properly, and it becomes this dirty snowball that's just rolling down a hill, all because we don't put enough priority on mental health and healthcare in this country. And it's sad, because anybody that's a first responder, and I am going to include dispatchers in that, because I am one of them, or I was one of them, and we are the first voice, and I don't care what. And this is my law enforcement brothers and sisters. Most of them will be the ones that get it, and there's a lot that don't want to hear this, but we're first responders.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that. And but I mean fire, I mean EMS, I mean police. the stuff that they end up having to deal with, I mean, it's just, there's, if we had a true handle on healthcare in our country, and if, people could get around that idea that, I don't know, I'm getting political, but healthcare should be a right for every American. And I include mental health care in that. And if we start there, a lot of these problems will fix themselves.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. And I mean, you see it time and time again. We go to the same places over and over again, and the system for, all the help that it may give is misdirected on times, and or there's roadblocks because of healthcare and everything like that. So these people are falling through the cracks. And if we simply could address the mental health needs and make them a priority and make them a right, as opposed to, you know, something that has a monetary value on it, I think we'd be in a much better place. That's
Yeah.
just my opinion. I think they shuffle too much onto law enforcement. Law enforcement has been forced to be the front line. Law enforcement and emergency medical services, fire department included,
Hmm.
fire services, they've been forced into becoming the front line of the opioid epidemic, of these mental health issues being forced out into the street, and that's
Right.
because of our healthcare system and the
Yeah.
way that it assigns monetary value to these things.
I really appreciate you bringing it back to the healthcare, and that leads me to ask you, where have you seen this work, this peer support work, making a change, making a difference?
Well, our so in our team, our partners in this, and they've been absolutely unbelievably amazing, and they've been nothing but supportive of us. So I'm going to give them a plug. There's a facility that's for emergency responders and the military, law enforcement, fire service, emergency medical service, and now dispatchers, called Onsite Academy, and they're based out of Western or Central Mass. They're up in Westminster, and they have a facility there, and it's specifically to assist all of those people with critical incident debriefs, with certain things like that. So I've seen the amount. I mean, even before we got involved, they've been helping various law enforcement, fire services all around the country in incredible ways, and they've prolonged careers. They've gotten people back up when they've suffered personal or work related issues, anything. They're amazing people, and they care about the work they do, and I mean, I've seen it firsthand, and it's incredible to see. I've had it personally assist me. I One of the things that occurred when I started getting involved and realizing that there was a need for this, my work place was, one of the things that happened was I realized, I need I need to talk to somebody about some of the issues that I'm having. I had gone through the death of my father, and he was diagnosed with cancer. All the while I was working in the call center on the graveyard shift, and basically for a period of a few years when he was, going through the process of, dealing with a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, I was his primary caretaker. I had a lot going on, and after his death, I mean, he was my best friend. I mean, he was my guy, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think that was the breaking point for me. I realized after that I say this all the time when I'm talking to other people about peer support. I didn't realize I needed it right up until the moment I realized I did.
Yeah.
And I think just saying I need to go up, and I went through the program, and they just put everything into a perspective that I could understand, I could relate to, I could work with. And the, my experience going through receiving peer support and receiving help from those that I could talk to and that understand specifically. I mean, you're talking to people that have done the work.
Yeah.
They've been in the seat, they've been on the job, they've been in the back of the ambulance, they've seen the things you've seen. Most of them have seen a lot worse. And I was able to be open and to speak to the issues and not be judged, not feel judged, feel like I was being heard. And that made all the difference. And then once the education aspect came in and I started realizing, that, oh, this is, just how our minds work, I was able to, it was the catalyst for me to make a whole host of other changes in my life.
Mm.
I mean, I was, like I said before, I was going the wrong way. I was, I had bad habits going on and I was dealing with my issues with doubling down on those bad habits. And, I just, I realized that, if I kept going down that road, it was a dead end and I had to do something about it. And when I went through the peer support just for dealing with my grief issues with my dad, it opened up so many other doors that had previously been slammed shut by me that allowed me to even just contemplate a change. And then, slowly but surely, it took a little bit of time, but, it was a catalyst for me to decide to do something about my health and go on this journey and do that. And then that was the catalyst for deciding to finally make a career change. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why I felt trapped. These doors were just slammed shut. They were welded shut, and I thought that that was it. I have to just stay on this path. This is just the way it's going to be, and I'm going to have to learn to live with it. And then I realized I don't have to do that, so all these things happened as a result of me, just saying, yeah, I need to talk to somebody. So they don't know it, or I have told them, but they don't realize like that, if I hadn't gone up there, I think things would have taken a much different path. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that story with us. And I'm so grateful for it, Sean, because that's the kind of thing that, like you say, you don't know you need it until you know you need it. And those doors you closed, but it also means you have the power to open them. And I really appreciate hearing your perspective on that.
And the funniest thing, and if we had it, this would have been a much different conversation 2.5 years ago, because I still wasn't there yet. And that was after I received, a lot of help. I was feeling better about certain things, but I hadn't truly realized that. It takes time, and it takes, you have to allow yourself to be open to yourself, I think, in a way that, you can't, I don't know, if you're I mean, we're all really good at slamming doors, we're all really good at saying, but I mean, I think being accountable to yourself, first and foremost, being accountable to yourself, it's a hard thing to do, but when you can get to that point, it just changes everything. And took me 44 years to get there, but I figured it out in some manner. I mean, I'm still, like everybody else, we're all a work in progress, right? There's always improvements. We're always going to have, self-doubt, and we're always going to have regret. We're always going to have all those things, but it's okay. That's a part of life. And, you just have to accept those things and still decide to, try to move past them and, higher. Try to anyways,
Yeah, I hear you. I'm still on that journey, and
it's the old school Red Sox fan in me. I can't get, it's like we used to say hope springs eternal, and then we won a few World Series, so now everybody's like, okay. But I remember what it was like back in the 80s and 90s. It was pretty rough. I just thought of something, and I think like a lot of it too, I think this might be specifically a New England thing, so I hope I'm not, limiting audience, but it's hard to be an optimist. And I find it hard to be an optimist anyways. I mean, we live in a, there's a lot that you can be cynical about. There's a lot you can be pessimistic about. There's a lot you can feel down about. It's hard to be an optimist, especially when you're a New Englander, because I think we tend to be a lot more realist in some aspects, and I'm definitely that person. But I've learned to be an optimistic cynic, I guess. So I mean, you know, I don't know how it works, but you have to try to continue to plug away. I think it's, you just have to keep fighting, right? I mean, get busy living or get busy dying is, another thing that pops up in my head a lot. So I mean, it's like, you just have to try. You have to try. You have to fight.
Yeah. One last question for you. Where do you, speaking as an optimist to an optimist, what do you hope for the future in this work, or where do you see the future of your work, or of law enforcement, or mental health and law enforcement?
I want to be okay. So having said I'm an optimistic cynic, I'm also extremely cautiously optimistic, especially when it comes to government, law enforcement, everything, anybody that has worked in any government capacity, whether it's, I know
Yeah.
you've experienced this, the gears grind extremely slow. So I mean, to the point where I sat in a position for about 10 years that I no longer had faith was going to change, yet somehow I still managed to just grind it out because I hoped beyond all hope that it would. I see the signals. I will say, being that from the inside out person, I am concerned about some of the ways. I think it has to be measured and thought out appropriately how we're going to react to changes in law enforcement, how we're going to react to changes in society, how we're going to react to putting forward mental health. I see, I so having said all that, I'm extremely cautiously optimistic, but I do see signals of things loosening up. I mean, when you have professional athletes on world stages now talking about their mental health as in normalizing it to the point where it's as easy to talk about as, they pulled a hamstring and they need some time off. There's still that other side that doesn't want to relate or doesn't understand, and there's backlash, but I see those people as being fierce advocates because they're speaking up for what's important, and you see more and more of that every day. I see it happen in the law enforcement community,
Yeah.
where you have a lot more police officers that are talking about mental health. That also brings an aspect to humanizing the badge, which is an extremely important thing, because
Yeah.
I think there's a huge misconception on both sides that somehow law enforcement officers are wired differently than every other human walking the face of the earth. But I'm here to tell you guys, guess what? They're not. They're just as failable as every single person walking the earth.
Yeah.
The only difference is they happen to be in a situation where every action that they make can affect a person's life to a very, very final degree, right? I guess there are consequences to their actions that are above and beyond a lot of other
Yeah.
chosen professions. I see signals that things are getting better, but the realist in me realizes we're still in the dark side of the moon right now. We're not there yet. We're not even close. But there's more studies being done. That stuff needs to continue because we need to battle the stigma every day. I mean, we need to wage war against it. If you want to fight, that's the fight. There needs to be a paradigm shift in our societal structure for this to really take hold and gain the footing it needs. And I would like to be more hopeful that that's going to happen. I don't know when. I mean, I think politically speaking, obviously we're in extremely tumultuous times. Even now, in the current state we're in, I mean, I'm very unsettled as to whether we can really get that foothold we need to where we can advance this to a point
Hmm.
where our societal needs are being met. So it's an uphill battle. And I don't know I don't honestly don't know where it would be in 5 years. I don't know where it would be in 10. What I hope is that our efforts, I already know my our efforts on a ground grassroots, our peer support unit level, we've had more success than failure, in my opinion, and that makes me extremely happy.
Yeah.
I've seen the direct result, personally speaking, and through others, I've seen the direct result of things we've been able to help facilitate and get people to the help they need. And so that is amazing to me because that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right.
So it was just, hey, go to the bar and drink it off, and that
Right.
was the adage. So now that's changing. So I'm very, very pleased with that. I think that needs, and I'm seeing an uptick in that industry wide, which is amazing. I think the push for this civilianized career structure has also helped facilitate that because now we have people in positions of management that understand exactly how important it is and they're advocating now. And we need more of that. We need our sworn brothers and sisters to do the same and start advocating for us as well. So that's another part of it that's an uphill fight. It's changing. I see that changing too. Now there are many more voices on the sworn side that understand the importance of it for their civilian counterparts. So that is amazing. So I do see things improving, but I, I I think in general, again, there needs to just be an enormous paradigm shift in how we value our structure and of health in this country. I think it just needs to change, and I think I don't know where that's going. That
Yeah.
scares me. If I'm being honest, because I think we're split. I mean, I don't think I know we're split right now. There's a lot of people that just look at the financial aspect of it, and that's the be all end all, and that that has to shift. It has
Yeah.
to. It has to. It's important. If it doesn't, then I still have concern. But
Well, what I hear you saying is that the grassroots efforts, the people telling their stories and being accountable for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and telling that story, telling their journeys to other people, and having that reverberate and work on a smaller scale, getting away from this enormous governmental bureaucracy and having people come together and work for change on a smaller grassroots, genuine, authentic storytelling basis is how change happens. And yeah, it's slow, but it's powerful. And I mean, I met you a couple months ago when we were talking about this, but your story has stayed with me, Sean, and you've humanized for me and educated me on not only how it all works, what goes on behind the curtains, but also the human side of a first responder in the call center, in a dispatch work. And I had never, you opened my eyes to that. I had never thought about that before. And I really just am so touched by your story and by the fight that you're in, and the way you do it so genuinely and so optimistically. And I really appreciate it. I think this is the way change happens.
yeah, I think you touched on an important point that I'm really glad you actually brought up, and that's I 1000% agree with you that the best model for achieving success is by this true peer driven aspect of it. It has to, in the beginning of anything, any sort of collaboration or I mean, trust is the key,
Yeah.
and a lot of the issues that again, I tend to go wide and and these thoughts are abstract, but a lot of the issues I think we're experiencing as a society is because there's no trust in government on